Hi, everybody. Dave Rauch here, CEO of ProTech Building Services, and welcome to the Maintenance Manager. And we are absolutely honored today to have Linc Cummings, who is the founder, one of the original founders of CAI in 1973. And so, Linc, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Appreciate you.
And I want to talk a little bit first about you as a person. And I know that you have a background in the military. And then I think you went on to commercial aviation, and you have a big background. Can you talk a little bit about that first?
My commercial aviation was a sidebar. Yes, I was in the Air Force, but I didn't fly in the Air Force. I controlled airplanes.
Gotcha.
When I got out, GI Bill took me through airline flight training,
Gotcha.
all the way through airline transport pilot. I was the youngest of my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had to scramble to keep up. So I learned early in life, if you want to be able to survive, you've got to fight harder.
Right. Work harder and fight harder.
And that's
Yeah.
been my life plan.
Gotcha.
So flying was one of those.
But you're most well known for founding CAI,
Right.
and you and I chatted for about 2 hours last summer in Dallas.
Yep.
And you were telling me some things about how you started it, and I'd love for you to share that with us. Of course, now I have statistics here. When in 1970 there were only 10,000 communities, 10,000 HOAs
In
housing
the country,
in the whole country,
not
housing
just HOA, common interest communities,
common interest development.
condominium, cooperative, homeowner association.
Right, housing less than 1 million people. Now, in 2023, today, there are 365,000 communities, common
buildings.
interest developments, housing 76 million people. So that's huge. So you started something that's really, really massive, really, really successful. Can you tell us a little how you started it? What was the idea? What sparked the idea?
Fairly early in my career, I got promoted from a IBM plant to an IBM headquarters, and that happened to be in the Washington area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I moved to Maryland, and I became the 15th buyer and the 18th resident of a new town called Montgomery Village.
Ah.
And I became president of my homeowners association.
Mm-hmm.
And a year later, I became vice president of the umbrella of all of this new town. One of the first major properties built with private cash.
Gotcha.
No outside influence. So they did what they wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
which was do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was enamored by that zeal and kind of jumped on their bandwagon and helped build Montgomery Village.
Wow.
we
And
didn't-
so you were one of the very first board members.
I
mean,
the first
yeah.
of that.
Of that area, but
And we didn't know what we were doing. So what I did is I heard about Reston and Columbia,
mm-hmm.
one in the Baltimore area and one in the Virginia area.
Right, planned communities.
Planned communities.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I got the developers and their general managers
Mm-hmm.
to join me for lunch every month for a couple of years. And God, I had this problem. What did you do?
Uh-huh.
And we exchanged.
Uh-huh.
And that really became the impetus later on for CAI.
Gotcha. So was this well before CAI? Was this 1960?
Yeah, this was in the late 60s.
Late 60s, so before
And-
73.
National
National
NAHAB,
National Association of Home Builders,
Home Builders,
NAHB,
the Urban Land Institute.
ULI. Mm-hmm.
Two entities heavily involved in community building
Mm-hmm.
and structure.
Sure.
NHB knew that these new type of housing was different. NHB was worried because builders were taking advantage of the innocent buyers, and Congress was starting to investigate. And NHB said, we got to do something. We need to have a nonprofit, independent person group that can help guide.
Gotcha.
And they looked for people, and I was nearby and had a reputation. So they asked me to be the homeowner representative.
Wow. And NAHB is a national organization of home builders. They're located
Correct.
in Washington.
In Washington, D.C.
And that's why they were nearby.
And ULI
Gotcha.
is also
Urban
in
Land
Washington.
Institute. Yep.
And so it
So
started.
they sought you out?
They sought
They
me
came
out.
and found you.
We spent 2.5 years meeting somewhere in the country. The three of us plus Byron Hankey, and we plotted the creation of CAI.
Gotcha.
Tried to figure out how we could do that differently and better. I became the first vice president of the trustees. The president, May Russell, was managing the first new town in California. Unfortunately, she had cancer and didn't make many of the meetings. So for the first 3 years, I was always acting president. Then I became elected myself. So then I had 6 years of leadership of the starting of CAI. And I would argue that all of what is CAI, with the exception of the LAC, was started within my realm.
And do you ever regret not still being able to have the builders as somewhat of a partner? In other words, the transition from builder control to homeowner control has been a challenge. Of course, we've written.
Yes.
There's a best practice report on how to do it, but it's still kind of difficult.
I'm very old school.
Yeah.
So the answer is hell yes. Now I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant. We said we wanted to have 5 interest groups. We would have balanced policy making. All 5 interest groups had equal voice. It was the builder developer, the government official, the we call association colleague, the accountants, the engineers,
service providers,
and the managers, and of course the homeowners.
Right.
Even though the homeowners, home builders are out of the loop, they have a continuing responsibility, just like the public official.
Because they build it, they know it better than anybody else.
You're a little bit rudderless if you don't have the 5 anchors.
Right.
Now I'm old school on that. So a little bit of a different answer to your question. The world moves on, and we can't hang on to everything in the past.
Right.
So I can give up some things. I can give up public official because they were never really motivated. They play a role, but they're never really motivated.
Right.
The builder developers are almost in the same category. They're no longer involved, so don't bother me. But that leaves me with the rest. And we need to maintain the rest. And we've lost it. For good reason.
Well, we have the manager, of course, community manager, community association manager, key. We have the service providers and the homeowner. And the homeowner involvement is critical, as you know, because they have to get involved to learn about the association. And then once they do that, hopefully they can percolate up and become a board member, right? And so CAI, what you set up was educationally motivated, right? You wanted to educate board members and managers.
The first thing we realized in our strategy sessions, the missing piece of information, knowledge in the operation of what is a common interest community.
Right.
How is it structured, and how do you operate it? I helped create the leadership training program, LTP, which over the years got improved, modified, and it's had 4 or 5 names, but all basic. Homeowner, what do you need to know? It's still critical. However, today, increasing number of homeowners don't care to learn. They're of an era they know, don't need to train me.
So that's what you're seeing in the last 5 years? Is this something because of COVID? What do you...
A degradation over the last decade.
The last decade.
We shifted from we to me. The mentality of most of the people started, what can we do together?
Right.
Now, here's what I want.
Right.
It's a cultural thing, I think, worldwide.
Right. Yeah, because, I mean, the boards are serving at no charge. I mean, they don't get paid. It's all volunteers. And, you know, you have to somehow, the key to success in all this is get these board members, these homeowners, to be willing to serve as board members. It all starts with that, doesn't it?
It's not just theirs. It's serving the community.
Right.
Common interest communities depend upon volunteers. We now have people that have grown much of their lives in the condominiums, cooperative homeowners associations.
Right.
And the economy is getting them out of the realm of being able to afford. We're going to see people leave the industry if we don't get back to basics.
Yeah, I would like to see the construction of a lot more condominiums, which is really affordable housing.
We have to have shared housing, cooperative housing. You know, I'm in my 90s. Sometime in the next 10 years, I'm probably going to be alone and can't afford to be my unit. I'm going to have to take in a roommate. Why don't we plan for that now?
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. We have a wonderful system that works now, and that's what you're trying to talk about.
But there's so many challenges, right? And I think you've identified one of the biggest ones, which is people wanting to serve. And I think we recently talked to Mark Jones from Avalon, and he was noting that everybody's so busy. You know, it's a cell phone, but what are the other challenges that you see in addition to that in the industry, in addition to the homeowners not being interested in serving?
The biggest challenge is following the bylaws. If you follow the bylaws, and it's designed to run everything appropriately. But if you respect your fellow human beings and serve.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, another challenge, if I may, is unruly board meetings. And, you know, we had a community manager that was shot. I think that was somebody down in Georgia last year. So board meetings, you know, can become contentious. And so all the more reason for turning to sources of education like CAI to help train board members how to deal with people that are either not interested in serving or unruly and contentious.
As a consultant, I've helped maybe 1,000 boards. And it's because they don't know how to run their meetings. And my style is to not chide them or blame them, but how about if you do this? Timed board agenda, follow the procedures.
Yeah.
Any board meeting well prepared and facilitated can be done in an hour.
Do you have any recommendations for management companies on how to get these, get the education in place, get board members educated any more than is currently being done? I mean, I know we're doing a lot to try to get board members educated,
Management
but
companies and managers
Mhm.
know what your position description is and do it
Mhm.
with integrity. There's a small cut of the managers in this country, the outstanding ones. They don't work for pay. They work to get their job done the right way, honestly and straightforward.
Mhm.
A part of my consultancy, about a third of it, was placing general managers in senior positions.
Mhm.
I was able to sometimes triple their salary. Being able to tell the board, no,
Yeah.
we can't do that. Let me tell you why.
Right.
Let me tell you how you can do this, how you can achieve your objective, but do it legally.
Yep.
But there's a trend to say that when the board comes and tells you, or the president tells you to do something that's wrong, okay.
Yeah, just grin and bear it.
And those managers are never happy, and they don't do well.
Right.
Those who stand up and do what's really right are worth a lot.
Mhm. So, Linc, I'm very interested in maintenance and maintenance
Yep.
planning and maintenance programs. And, we came out with a report last year, the foundation did.
Powerful.
What are your thoughts on maintenance?
Well, let me add a word which I know is fundamental in your preventive maintenance.
Mhm.
Our whole governing documents are presumed that our buildings last forever. If it's commercial, at the end of economic life, it's ripped down
Yeah,
and a new one's put up.
right.
But in our financial or legal world, we have to keep it going.
Mhm.
Ergo, we must have reserves, but we also have to have preventative maintenance.
Right,
Not just maintenance,
right.
foreseeing and preparing.
Yep.
But I'm also suggesting by the last 3 sentences that we ought to figure a way to change our documents to enable us to be more like commercial buildings.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's an awful lot of roadblocks.
Yep.
But our buildings, on average, are at the end of their economic life.
Right.
We're going to face it either in the failure of the association
Right.
or change the...
Well, great example of exactly what you're talking about is Champlain Towers South in terms of preventive maintenance. That is a community that had a real problem with waterproofing. It was very close to the ocean, lots of rain in Florida.
Well, there was an intrinsic problem
Mhm.
because of the atmosphere there.
Moist.
Moisture and salt water and
Yep.
all of the above. I think the biggest problem in many properties is the boards are not willing to step up to what's needed,
Right.
to acknowledge.
Yeah. And that's what happened at Champlain Towers.
Exactly.
They saw that because they hadn't waterproofed the pool deck properly, the concrete started to spall off because the steel was expanding. The rebar was starting to rust and expand, causing the spalling. And they didn't know what to do. And so that continued to happen. And then finally, when they had an estimate to start repairing this stuff, it was $3 million. And then they had to do a special assessment, and you know how popular they are. And so I think they went through a couple different boards of directors. And then I know that it went from 3 million to then it was 9 million. And they kept putting it off because they didn't know how to deal with that that big financial hit. And they didn't want to, like you said, increase the assessments for their neighbors, which would make them very unpopular. And so then it went from 9 million to I think 14 million was what it was at when it collapsed.
And now what's the real cost? A
It
multiple.
was $1 billion. The insurance company paid out $1 billion plus 98 lives. And I think that was Champlain Towers was a turning point, if you will. And that's because before, a board of directors, which isn't required to do maintenance, could just let it go. But as Champlain Towers showed, that boards oftentimes don't know how to do it. But my thinking now is that boards now, if they don't maintain, people could die. So I think it's kind of a new world now.
It is a leverage to educate and change people. I'm not sure it's yet working.
Yeah. Well, I do know that CAI
Has been wonderful.
Created the task forces.
An industry standard approach.
With Tom Skiba and Don Bauman. They put the task forces together, came up with a condo public policy safety report.
Task force they pulled almost overnight.
Yep.
Of literally the nation's top talent.
Yep. And then they went to all the state legislatures and tried to promote new legislation to prevent another Champlain Towers. But you can't make a legislature adopt law. You can only recommend. So that's kind of where we're at.
I want to shift the emphasis for a minute. Our form of housing, however, is outstanding. It has so many advantages.
Well, I do believe that most new communities are built in this form of ownership, the HOA, the CID.
Oh yeah.
I think everybody sees the
majority today.
Yeah. But it does require, kind of like the founding of our country required people to serve in government with no pay. It was a long time ago, but
you're right, require, but I would like to turn it around, the opportunity.
So, and your contribution to CAI, creating it, and I mean, you're still here. You're in your 90s, and you're at the annual conference here, giving advice still. So your contribution is amazing. So, thank you so much for your time today, Linc. Appreciate it. Thanks for everything you've done for everybody.
Thank you.